Hey, I'm Justin from Alchitry, and in this video, we're going to talk about the various ways we can use bits to represent values. Let's start at the beginning with a single bit. You'll often see a single bit represented as a 0 or a 1, but that's already labeling its states with values. A single bit is really just something that has two discrete states. What meaning we attach to each state is up to us. For example, instead of a 0 or a 1, you'll often see the Boolean values of true and false attached to a bit. But the actual physical representation of the bit didn't change, just the meanings we're using. If you had a system where you only needed to store two values, say 134 and 218, we could use a single bit with each of its states corresponding to one of those values. There's no need to get more complicated than that since we only have two states. However, most of the time we're looking to differentiate between more than just two states. And in those cases, we can combine multiple bits to create more combinations of unique states. How many states? Well, each bit gives us two unique states, and combining them has a multiplicative effect. That means with n bits, we have 2 to the n number of unique states. Even though the 0 and 1 attribution to the states of a bit is somewhat arbitrary, I'm going to be using 0 and 1 for the rest of this video for simplicity. Using 0 and 1 makes the most sense whenever we're working with numbers. Let's take a look at how classic binary numbers are represented. Binary is written the same as decimal, but instead of having 10 unique digits, we only have 2. The number of unique digits the number system has is known as its base. So for decimal, it's base 10, and for binary, it's base 2. There are other number systems, such as hexadecimal, that is base 16, but that's outside the scope of this video. When we write a number in binary, we write the bits in a row just like we would for decimal. For example, 1011. The magnitude of the place scales with the base of our number system. The first digit here has the value of 2 to the 0, which is 1. The next one is 2 to the first, which is 2, then 2 squared, which is 4, and finally 2 to the third, which is 8. If we take the value at each position and multiply it by its position's magnitude and then sum all of those up, we get the value of the total number. That means that the value associated with the combination of 1011 is 1 times 2 to the third plus 0 times 2 to the second plus 1 times 2 to the first plus 1 times 2 to the 0. Adding all these up gives you 11. Notice that even writing out 11 has this same pattern, but in base 10. We can write 11 instead as 1 times 10 to the first plus 1 times 10 to the 0. If you've worked with computers in binary before, this may all be second nature to you. However, keep in mind that these values are really just things that we're assigning to specific combinations of bits. This particular scheme has a lot of convenient benefits, but we didn't have to do it this way. Instead, we could have just assigned arbitrary values to arbitrary combinations of bits. For example, look at this table. The only thing that really stops us from doing something like this is that when you want to start doing math and other things with the numbers, it gets unnecessarily complicated. However, there are cases where the properties of binary aren't ideal and an alternative would be preferred. A great example of this is gray code. Gray code has the unique property that any adjacent value differs from its neighbors by only 1 bit. Take a look at this table at values 3 to 4. In binary, all 3 bits have to change when going from one to the other. However, the gray value only needs to change 1 bit. This even holds true when going from 7 to back to 0 or 0 to 7. There are some cases where this is very advantageous, such as crossing clock domains. However, that's a topic for another video. A gray code may look unrelated to its binary counterpart. However, it's very easy to change between the two using a handful of XOR gates. This means that we can switch between them when needed, getting the benefits of both. Until now, all of the numbers that we've been representing have been positive. However, this is the 21st century, and sometimes we use negative numbers. If you were to try and come up with a way yourself on how to represent negative numbers using what we've already covered, you'll probably come up with using a single bit to represent the sign, being 0 for positive and 1 for negative, and then using your remaining bits to represent the value. This is often called sign magnitude notation, and it works, but it definitely has a few drawbacks. First, this has the slight awkwardness of actually having a positive and a negative 0, which are really the same thing. Second, when doing math, things get a little complicated because you have to check the sign bits and handle various cases separately. Luckily, there's a better way, and it's called 2's complement. You'll often see values that are using 2's complement referred to as signed numbers, and ones that are just plain binary as unsigned. To negate a number in 2's complement, you simply take all the bits, invert them, and then add 1. For example, if we used 4 bits to represent 1, so 0, 0, 0, 1, we would invert those, so we'd get 1, 1, 1, 0, and then add 1, so we'd get 1, 1, 1, 1. 1, 1, 1, 1 is the 2 complement representation of -1. 2's complement has a handful of really nice features that make it the default choice when dealing with negative numbers. First of all, just like before, the leftmost bit can be interpreted as a sign bit. When it's 0, the number is positive, and when it's 1, the number is negative. Second, there's no positive and negative 0. There's just 1, 0. This does lead to the slight quirk that the negative and positive ranges are slightly asymmetric. For example, if you have 8 bits, you can go from 127 all the way down to negative 128. Finally, the best part of 2's complement is that math kind of just works. For example, if you had a subtraction circuit and you were performing 2 minus 3, you would end up with 15, assuming we were using 4 bits. This is because binary math is cyclical and the value underflows, starting back up at the top. However, 15 is 1, 1, 1, 1, and as we saw earlier, 1, 1, 1, 1 is negative 1, which is of course the correct answer for 2 minus 3. This also just works for addition. For example, if you had 5 and you were going to add negative 2 to it, you would get the value of 3. In this case, 2's complement takes advantage of overflow and the value wrapping again back to the bottom. 5 is 0, 1, 0, 1, and negative 2 is 1, 1, 1, 0. If we add these together, we get 0, 0, 1, 1, which is 3 as expected. Note that there would be another 1 on the left, but this is discarded as overflow. If we wanted a full 5-bit result, we would have to first extend the inputs to be 5 bits. When extending signed numbers, we have to look at the sign bit and use that to pad the value on the left. In that case, 5 would become 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, and negative 2 would become 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. By extending the numbers like this and adding them together, we still get 3. Properly handling the extension is often the only thing that comes up that's different when doing math with signed numbers instead of unsigned. All right, so now we can represent positive and negative numbers, but so far we've only been able to represent integers. The easiest way to represent fractional numbers is to use fixed point notation. With fixed point, we don't actually change how we represent signed and unsigned values. We actually just implicitly move the decimal point. For example, let's say we want to be able to represent values like 1/4 or 3/4. Let's assume that we have 4 bits to work with again. We can implicitly say that instead of the decimal point being all the way on the right, it's 2 places to the left. This practically divides the value by 4. That means that the value of 0001 would be 1/4, and the value of 0100 would be just 1. Performing math with fixed point, just like 2's complement, is again almost free. When performing addition or subtraction, you just have to make sure that both of your values have the same number of fractional bits. For example, if we had 2 fixed point numbers that had 2 fractional bits each, and we added them just as standard integers, the result would still have a value that had 2 fractional bits. We can dive a little bit into more formal math to show why this works. We can rewrite our fixed point numbers as being an integer times the power of 2. The power of 2 is the negative number of fractional bits that we have in each one. So we'll say 2 to the negative n for this example. We can then write our addition as a times 2 to the negative n plus b times 2 to the negative n. That lets us factor out the 2 to the negative n and end up with a plus b times 2 to the negative n. That just shows what we said before. We can add a and b together and the result will have the same number of fractional bits. But do note that to be able to factor out the 2 to the negative n, both a and b had to use the same number of fractional bits, in this case n. Now let's take a look at multiplication, but in this case we won't assume that they're using the same number of fractional bits. We'll say a has n fractional bits and b has m fractional bits. The expression then becomes a times 2 to the negative n times b times 2 to the negative m. If you remember your exponent rules, we can combine the powers of 2 by adding their exponents together, so the expression becomes a times b times 2 to the negative n plus n. This means that when you multiply 2 fixed point numbers, the number of fractional bits in the result is the sum of the fractional bits of both operands. For example, if we took a value with 2 fractional bits and multiply it by a value with 2 other fractional bits, the result would have 4 fractional bits. Figuring out which bit pattern to use to represent a fixed point number can sometimes be a bit of a pain. That's why Lucid has some helper functions. The function fixed point takes in a real number as its first argument, the total number of bits you want, followed by the number of fractional bits. The result from this function is the closest approximation to the first argument. There are some variations of this, such as C fixed point, which gives you the value that is closest, that is equal or above the value you're trying to approximate, and F fixed point, which gives you the value that is equal or less than the value you were trying to approximate. Sometimes the range of values you need to represent can be vast. You could use an equally vast number of bits to represent all of the values you need, but it can often be much more practical to use something called floating point. Instead of implicitly fixing the decimal point at a specific spot, floating point allows it to move dynamically. You may remember scientific notation from chemistry class. This is where you write values by using a base value between 1 and 10 multiplied by a power of 10. For example, to write 2,658, we would write 2.658 times 10 to the third. This is the basis for how floating point works. There are many ways you could implement a floating point scheme, but there's a widely adopted industry standard, IEEE 754. The floating point number is split into 3 parts: the sign bit, the exponent, and the fractional bits. By using a sign bit, floating point values naturally have a plus and minus 0. They also have some special reserved values for cases like plus and minus infinity, and 2 different versions of not a number. You can look at the standard for more details on the full representation. By taking advantage of the standard, instead of trying to roll your own scheme, you can use pre-made circuit blocks for doing math on floating point numbers for like addition and subtraction. It's important to keep in mind that even like a single precision floating point number that uses 32 bits will have a vast range larger than a 32-bit integer. It's not magic. It doesn't get that range for free. It gets that by adding lots of gaps. There are many values in a float's range that it simply cannot represent, which can lead to some unintuitive results. A classic example is all the memes showing 0.1 plus 0.2 does not equal 0.3. Instead, it's like 0.3000004. The error arises because of these gaps. We kind of expect simple numbers like 0.1 and 0.2 to be perfectly representable in floating point numbers, but that's actually just like not the case. In base 2, these become repeating decimal points, and we just can't represent them perfectly, which leads to small errors. Up until now, we've talked about using bits to represent numbers. However, you don't have to represent numbers with them. You can use them for anything you want. The most common non-number mapping has to be text. There are a handful of standards that are used to represent many languages and extensions for things like emojis and other types of symbols. However, basic ASCII is a great example of showing how you can represent arbitrary things using a somewhat arbitrary mapping. The need to encode text was actually how we ended up with 8 bits as a byte. 256 combinations that it provides was just enough to cram all the letters, numbers, symbols with a little bit of headroom left over. In conclusion, a collection of bits has no intrinsic meaning. It's up to us to decide what they mean and how we use them. There are a handful of convenient standards when you need your bits to represent numbers, each one with its own trade-offs, and you'll have to decide when and where to use each type. If you find yourself in a situation where none of the standard ways make sense, you can always assign your own meaning to your own bits. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Thanks for watching. However, shut up, phone. It's not magic. Oh, or you can't, yeah, all right, I'm calling it.